Hello, I'm Kaylin from the Co-op, and I would like to welcome you to today's webinar. I'm very excited to introduce our host, Robert Adut. Robert has been teaching math for over a decade, where his personal mission was to explore every specific way to reach his students. Through years of dedication and focus on student connection, his classes became fun, lively, and positive beacons of learning for both him and his students. Out of these experiences, Yay Math was born. Yay Math's online proliferation has provided Robert the opportunity to give multiple TEDx talks on conquering math anxiety, create comprehensive online courses for homeschool families to use, and to pen his debut book, congratulations, One-on-One 101, The Art of Inspired and Effective Individual Instruction. So I'm going to hand the microphone over to Robert in just a moment. There is a chat box, so while Robert's presenting, please feel free to type any questions you might have there, and we will get to as many as we can at the end. And with that, I will let you take it away, Robert.
Thank you, Kaylin. You hear me okay now?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for the warm introduction, for having me on. I'm really excited about this. I just want to take a quick moment of gratitude for myself and for all of us in this huge moment in history to be able to participate in an online learning forum in this nature right now. I know it's somewhere between 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. In the United States time. And right now it's 8 p.m. in Italy, where my family and I are traveling. And only in this moment in history can we be out sightseeing through the streets of Florence during the day and having way too much pizza and maybe a little more red onions than I should have had. But we're in a web-based situation, so I don't have any breath paranoia. So it's great to be able to participate in this moment with everyone that's attending. And I look forward to connecting. Yes, so we're going to be talking about math anxiety today. And here's the title: Think you can recite timetables while evading a tiger at the same time. Look, this is about math anxiety. And for those of you in attendance, I just want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk about what could be a really cumbersome topic. And you deserve to smile. You deserve to smile. So I have a little treat for you, all right? Anyone in here in the Lion's Den with us. I have a brief highlight clip, a 2-minute video of Yay Math's only viral video throughout the Yay Math library, all right? So this is the viral video in question. It's an April Fool's gag, all right? I think you're really gonna like this. Half the class was away on a field trip, while the other half and I conspired to teach a lesson that made absolutely no sense, but pretend that it did when the students on the trip returned, all right? So when the students returned, half the class and I were talking about a topic that had zero sense to it. It was all nonsense on purpose. And we watched them slowly, basically unravel in this panic of not understanding a single thing that was going on. And this video does have a lot of views and a lot of traction for certain reasons. And I think that it speaks to the heart of a huge fear that we all have, which is the fear of being completely lost, even in math class, the fear of being completely lost in a math setting when everyone else around you understands. So that's, I think, the chord that it struck. While you watch, first of all, I challenge you to not smile. And secondly, I want you to think of 2 things, and then you're welcome to write them in the chat box when we can read them. I want you to comment on 2 things, any of 2 things that come to mind. 1, how you think the students feel. That's the first. And the second is how you see my role within this situation, all right? So we're sort of gonna watch it with a collaborative sense in addition to just enjoying it, all right? I'm gonna treat you like a collaborator. How do students feel when they're utterly lost, and what my role is in that. All right, here we go.
And then that creates a line right below the 3, 4. So that would be 3, 3. If I can grab it. So no questions, yeah.
I have no idea.
I'm so lost. Thank you for asking. I knew this would happen. That's why I sort of I figured it would happen. Yeah, can you help us?
Yeah, and it's twice, so we have 2 lines, so it's.
What happens when you divide something? Yeah, question here.
So my cue is what?
You have to start
Dividing, like where did this come from? I don't
Right.
understand.
It's a formula.
How do you divide X, Y from 3, 4?
Good question. How do you divide X, Y? You mean how do you divide 3, 4 by X, Y?
I literally, I don't know. I can't wrap my mind around
Right.
any.
So now look, n equals 3, so it's going to be positive, right?
Yeah, which
Yes.
is fine. Okay. So my question, what are we doing?
Wait, time out. Do you not get?
I don't
get. Okay, I get. Guys, I appreciate that you're asking questions, and I appreciate that you have a good attitude. Yes, sigma. It was hard for them too. Okay, yes, sigma X, Y. And we said it was going to be something. We said that X1 and Y1's going to be 4. So, he's trying so hard. I love it. You're so curious. I'm so lost. What's going on? No, finish your question. I was just like reliving the moment with them that this happened before. That's why Leah's laughing.
All right, so there you have it. Okay. Remember, I do believe that playing pranks is an art form, and through this process, I actually learned of a very good phrase when you're playing a prank, and that is confuse, don't abuse, right? Because we have a very delicate situation with our own students. So I'm very interested to hear and learn what you thought the students felt like and what my role was within there. And now that you've thought of that, I'll just share my reaction. I'm really love this vibe. I love this video because there were so many points where the students could have become disenchanted or lost heart or lost faith in what they were doing or lost faith in themselves. But they were confused and they were laughing through confusion, right? This is a possible reality for all of us as parent teachers and as homeschool families. I feel like talking with homeschool families is sort of like the home team, you know, because when I speak to teachers about lead from the heart or lead with love, you know, you can only take that so far. It's sort of a figure of speech, but it's quite literal here. And I think that I'm basically hinting at what the solution is. It's a form of encapsulated love, all right? So we'll leave it there, okay? And we'll actually talk about what math anxiety is, okay? We'll get into the education part of this presentation. That math anxiety is a brain level issue, all right? So there is the fear center in our brain. It's called the amygdala, all right? And the teacher in me just wants to invite you so that you actually take something away from this and maybe impress your friends at a dinner party coming on Friday, is just to sound it out. It's called the amygdala. And that's the fear center of our brain. It's a singular center of our brain, okay? And when that center is tripped, when that center is provoked and is active, it actually works to shut down, literally shut down. There are 3 other centers in the brain that's for numerical processing and working memory. Those centers in the brain actually shut down when the amygdala is triggered, right? That's the fight or flight response that the amygdala does. I actually have an image of a gremlin. The amygdala is basically, there's a gremlin inside our amygdalas with a hand on the lever like this, okay? And if we come up to that little gremlin and we start poking at it, and it's like fear, stress, pressure, you know, failure, and just poke and poke and poke, the amygdala is triggered. It's a fight or flight response. The body surges with adrenaline, which is in many ways a beautiful thing. The fight or flight, the adrenaline response is great for keeping us alive. It builds our strength. It keeps us alert, keeps us on high alert. It helps us avoid danger. All those things powering up our beautiful survival mechanisms. But what the gremlin does when the amygdala is triggered is that it shuts down those portions of the brain that are responsible for math learning and math thinking. And it's no longer possible to do those types of math functioning. It would be like asking what's wrong with this light bulb when you don't send electricity to it. You can't ask what's wrong with the light bulb when there's no electricity pumping in. And to me, that's a really, really fascinating thing. I mean, think about what that's like. Think about the feeling, oh, I got a mosquito. Think about the feeling of being chased by a tiger. We're both running, we're running away. The tiger's basically right at us. And if I put my hand on your shoulder while we're running, and I said, please give me the ×7 tables. First of all, you'd be really upset with me, right? You'd be really upset. And secondly, you wouldn't be able to do it, right? The reason you're upset is because you know you're not able to do it. And that is the wrong time to do math. So this is what it is. This is like, it's a brain level concept. It's similar to the phobia of snakes or spiders. It's the same portions in our brain that are triggered, that actually work to wire the brain and shut them down. By the way, these portions are the 3 centers in the brain that are responsible for math functioning, which shut down in the fight or flight response. And that leads to a feeling, okay? The takeaway from this is that this is a human issue. If our brain centers shut down that are responsible for doing math, we may get the feeling that we're not good at it, okay? And that when that ends up happening is that even though we might quite possibly be good at math or have potential at math or be the chance to be successful at it, we feel like we won't because our brains are dark within those moments of anxiety, within those moments of fight or flight. And I want to talk a bit about that feeling, right? I'm really obsessed with the concept of feeling while learning. How we feel while we learn is so, so, so important. And anyone with any experience teaching will tell you this. The feeling is paramount. You could swap out the topic. You could take out math and put in its place a performative art or a sport or another academic subject. If we feel inspired or elevated or comfortable or safe, you'll actually inspire and ignite learning. I want to talk a bit about the feeling because a lot of feeling is also cultural. I read a fascinating article about school systems in China and how it's compared with school systems in the US, for example, traditional school systems, traditional learning. So imagine a student in China comes into math class and presents the homework to the teacher and says to the teacher, this took me 2 hours to do. And then the teacher and everyone in the class goes, whoa, respect, respect, nice, 2 hours. Wow, you really must have committed to it. And the student's like, yeah, look, I stapled the page. I used color here. You could tell I used a ruler and I drew the lines. I really took it seriously. I dove in, it took me 2 hours. Everyone in the room, like, nice, solid, respect. That's really great, you know? Same exact situation, a student in the United States comes into school, comes into math class, presents the homework to the teacher and says, teacher, this took me 2 hours to do. And what do we all ask? We say, what's wrong? Oh no, what didn't you understand? Oh no, I'm so sorry. And then another student will be like, yo, it took me 25 minutes. I'm the king, right? But who says that it's good to do math in 25 minutes or anything of consequence, and why 2 hours wouldn't be a bad thing? So this is a feeling question. If that person that took 2 hours needed to take the 2 hours, they took a pride in taking that long, and thus they wouldn't have any feelings of anxiety when doing the work. Whereas if they felt like, oh my God, I'm not getting this right away, clock is ticking, 15 minutes has passed, I'm only on the second problem, and then that amygdala can be triggered, the fight or flight can be triggered, and then it shuts down. And that's a real problem, right? So the feeling is really important at the heart of this all. Another thing that has to do with feelings with regards, we talked about time. Now there's a concept of feelings with mistakes, okay? There's a lot of research about growth mindset within the value of mistakes, and that the idea is Stanford University has talked about this, that mistakes make our minds grow. That if I were to ask everyone in this webinar to tell me what 5 plus 5 was, and then you told me that the answer is 10, I would have to apologize because I wasted your time in that sentence, because the brain doesn't grow when we get things right. The brain grows when we get things wrong, because when we get things wrong, it actually creates a space in our brain where the synapse fires, and in those synapse firings, that's when learning happens, and our brains literally grow. You could look up growth mindset versus fixed mindset and growth mindset when this webinar is done. It's fascinating stuff. It's life-changing stuff. So if you had the feeling that mistakes were wrong, then maybe anxiety would be triggered. But if you had the feeling that mistakes were part of your process, then maybe you would feel just fine and then good. And like anyone that's empowered, if I miss a kick in soccer, I wouldn't necessarily shut down if I was confident in the fact that I know that misses happen all the time. So if we can use that from a sports metaphor, then we should do the same when it comes to learning, right? So there's feelings with regards to time, feelings with regards to mistakes. We have to sort of reconsider our cultural relationship with how we learn so that we could have a broader conversation about when anxiety and why anxiety is actually triggered. It's a human issue. Okay, so let's talk about solutions. All right, let's talk about solutions. Good. Look, this is a complex issue. If we're going to talk about math anxiety, we have to also talk about when math anxiety is not happening, when it's not at play. And I think this is actually happening more often than it does happen. All right, so I'm going to walk you through basically two scenarios. The first scenario is more frequent. Okay. The first scenario is that a student is underprepared or doesn't have a level of mastery that he or she believes they do. And then they enter some sort of math situation, whether it be an assignment or some sort of test or an assessment. They don't know it, thinking that they do, and then the feeling of not knowing triggers some feelings of anxiety. And if that continues and it goes unchecked, and if the body takes over, then that anxiety triggers the shutdown. But the initial spark was the not knowing. Right? I've had a lot of students over the years, both with regards to teaching in classes and working with them privately. They say things like, I knew it before the test, but then when I got to the test, I blanked out, okay? So that's possibly a sign of math anxiety being the case, in which they had feelings of anxiety and their brain shut down within that fight or flight response of the amygdala. So then I would ask them this question. I would say, tell me what 5 plus 5 is. Right now, pressure's on, do it. Like I would do this like pretend mockiness, like I'm pressuring them, you know? And they usually get a smile like it's 10, no big deal. I was like, were you pressured there? Did you feel out of sorts? If I gave you a math test that was all 5 plus 5, 5 plus 7, 5 plus 4, and I said all the chips were down, high pressure, high stakes exam, would you feel comfortable with that test? Assuming, like, say it's like a high school student or something, the answer would be yes. And so we could say to them, well, okay, is it possible that you didn't know as much as you thought you did? And if so, what an amazing problem to have, because all we need to do is prepare you more. We just need to get you closer to a place where every problem on a test feels like 5 plus 5. Way better to have that problem, way better to be underprepared than to actually know the stuff, which is the math anxiety component, to know the stuff, feel anxious, and then have the brain shut down, right? And then you don't have access to it anymore. That would be scenario 2, where you actually walk in, have the anxiety within that math situation, and then the brain shuts down, and then anything the student actually knows would be buried, okay? Those brain scans that we saw previously within the Stanford study, it was done with an MRI, right? MRI, as we know, is a safe procedure on voluntary students that were in middle school. This was the study that Stanford did in 2012. And they gave them a series of math questions, as well as asked them to talk about different scenarios in math, like talking in front of the room or taking a test or presenting something with regards to math. And they noticed that when that fear center in the brain was triggered, those portions of the brain that process math and numbers actually literally shuts down. That is what math anxiety is. Math anxiety is not knowing how to do something, feeling anxious as a result of not knowing, and then, experiencing some degrees of shutdown from there. That's not math anxiety. That's just the discomfort of not knowing, which is something that we can coach and we can improve. So that's a really important distinction. Math anxiety is sort of way more serious, is that you actually know the stuff, but the brain that triggers the fight or flight is so active that that which we know is varied, okay? So we should ask ourselves, which is actually the triggering factor? Is it underpreparedness, which is, I think, more often and more easily treated, or is it the anxiety thing, which is a human issue that's sort of covering up the math knowledge, okay? So this is what we're getting at. The takeaway is that this is a human issue, not a math one. We have to address the human component of learning. And within human components of learning, we have to talk about how we feel with the educator maybe delivering the thing. This is one of the ways out of the woods. One of my educational heroes is a man by the name of Parker Palmer. He's a juggernaut. He's been in the game for 4 decades. He's now retired. He's one of my academic crushes, I call it. And his work is a big part of the research for my book, and which he talks about the human connectivity within the learning space. And this is no better suited in the homeschool environment. He talks about this concept called endowment. Endowment is a very fascinating and scary concept. Endowment basically is the subconscious and implicit protest that students have towards their educator if they feel feelings of upset or resent towards this person. They actually subconsciously, sometimes unbeknownst to themselves, sabotage their own thinking, their own learning, as a form of protest towards this figure that they resent, whether that be a teacher or a parent or some sort of learning mentor figure. Coach would be a good example. They actually endow themselves, and that's fascinating. That's fascinating. If you've ever had a job in which maybe your boss is someone who's not inspiring, maybe you've had feelings of endowment. You actually reduce yourself, you reduce your own capability, you reduce your own potential, and you may or may not realize that you're doing it, even as adults, which is really fascinating to me. So if endowment is the case when we are dealing with people that we are not inspired by or resentful of, then wouldn't the opposite be true? I mean, wouldn't the opposite, like when you feel connected, let's say if you've had a boss at a job that you really admired, you really respected, don't we go the distance for these people? I mean, don't we go the extra mile for them? Don't we put ourselves in harm's way for them? And this is basically the silver bullet, I think, to all the anxiety issues, is that we need to foster this deep and loving connection with regards to the person in front of us, to help them feel safe, to help them come out of any sort of feelings of fear with regards to learning. This is our job, so that they'll put themselves on the line, right? And I have some really beautiful visual examples for this, okay? And it has to do with sports, okay? So this, the player in this picture is a man by the name of Vernon Davis. At the time, he was with the 49ers here. Just quick disclaimer, all images are owned by the NFL. And since this is an educational presentation, right, please do not repost this or reproduce this, because that would be copyright infringement. But for purposes of education and in this private forum, it's okay. So Vernon Davis here is talking to his coach at the time, a man by the name of Mike Singletary, former player, very, very good player at his time. And Mike Singletary had one short year as a coach, and he was fired because of moments like this. Can you look at the face of Vernon Davis, the player here, and ask yourself whether he's going to put himself on the line for this coach? And this is a professional, by the way, a professional, far, far, far beyond students in high school or middle school. Is this person going to go the distance? You have to also always keep in mind that learning is the ultimate act of vulnerability. It's an act of vulnerability. When we learn something, we're exposing ourselves. We're opening up our chest because we potentially could be wrong. And if we're wrong and we're exposed like this, the person in front of us that would take a slash at us, it's devastating. It's devastating. And then the walls go up and we're not going to learn anymore. And we have feelings of isolation and feelings of disconnectivity. Okay? So if learning is the ultimate act of vulnerability, what is our role? Right? Think about questions like that. How about this? You think this guy's going to go do his best and explore his best potential? This is the same coach, same player. A man by the name of Dr. John Medina wrote a book called Brain Rules. And his quote is that the best way to get a student to not learn is to yell at them. And this is something that the coach is learning the hard way, because maybe that's something that maybe worked in previous generations. It doesn't work anymore. If it ever did, it doesn't work anymore. To yell at students is the best way to get them to shut down. And Dr. Medina goes on to say that it takes 2 hours to recover from that. 2 hours to recover from a yelling episode to get the brain back to neutral so it could function at its highest form, okay? Now, what about this? Interesting. Same player, different coach. How did this happen? This is the kind of stuff that I think about almost every day. I think about stuff like this as an educator and as a parent myself. What is this coach doing? What is this coach instilling in Vernon Davis now to make him so open and exposed? We talked about learning is the ultimate act of vulnerability. This was actually the peak of a very, very big playoff game in which Vernon Davis made a game-winning catch and he got drilled. He got hit really hard and he hung on to the ball and he was so flooded with emotion that he came to the coach and he broke down crying. In fact, I was able to grab the video of it. I hope you like it. Notice the coach speaking in the player's ear, speaking in Vernon Davis's ear. I obsess about what he's saying. These are the things I think about. Check this out.
Vernon Davis, Alex Smith, Frank Gore, a lot of these guys that have been here for a long time, fought through some very difficult years with the 49ers, and what a great day this is for them right now. That's why they love this guy. They will do anything for this guy. Look at Jim Harbaugh with Vernon Davis. That is awesome.
We all know that students will go the extra mile for those whom they feel a connection to. We all know it. We just need to say it and we need to live it. This is our role. This is our role. This is how we get out of the woods if students are ever feeling feelings of anxiety. And the first step to getting closer to tears like this, is if we are sure, if we're confident that the student before us is feeling those feelings of anxiety, we have to talk about what they're afraid of. That's it. We have to drill down to the root cause. And you can pick a variety of reasons. We do this with our daughter when she's having strong feelings. She's 5. Sometimes she's unable to articulate those feelings of upset, and we'll give her 3 scenarios of what she may be feeling and ask her to pick which one it is. So with regards to anxiety, with regards to learning, specifically with regards to math, we have to ask our students, we have to ask our children, what are they afraid of? Maybe they would say, I'm afraid of looking stupid. Maybe they would say, I'm afraid of being a failure. Maybe they would say, I'm afraid of letting you down or letting myself down. I'm afraid of the college admissions and process thing. I'm afraid of a money issue with regards to, let's say, how much college will cost, or whether they need extra help, like if they need tutoring and things like that. They would say, I'm afraid I won't be successful in life. I'm afraid that I won't measure up to you. I'm afraid of that I won't be able to select certain careers or take advanced classes in math that will stop me from advancing to certain careers or certain options in my life. I mean, that was just 10 fears I rattled off. Each one would be an entire case study. Each one would be an entire conversation. That's where that's the nerve to massage and heal, is where is the fear coming from? And it's imperative that we don't talk about any math until we address the question, what are you afraid of? And our role within that is to be consummate supporters and basically they're advocates. They're 100% advocate in that process. And then when the anxiety lessens, right, then their natural and true abilities of curiosity will be able to blossom, and then we can make some progress on the math side, okay? You'll notice I'm not really talking so much about the math thing. I reject the question, the math person or not math person. It's like anything. It's just put practice in and take the time, and you'll make progress. Sometimes people pick things up a little quicker, and sometimes they don't. But back to the China scenario, so what? So what? But if we feel that we're safe and welcome to learn and grow and progress and blossom, then we can conquer this thing. I'm going to end with this, and then I'd love to see some of your questions. It does not occur to some people that math can be scary, meaning math can be learned and thus unlearned. And here's one 5-year-old's take on math. This is my 5-year-old's take, okay? So as it's later in the evening local time, there's a reason that I'm not putting them to bed right now. And I explained to them, to our 2 daughters, that I'd be doing this and how excited I was for this moment. And I just asked her on a whim what her advice would be for anyone who's afraid of learning math. And then her answer just really struck me. I think she stumbled onto some wisdom that was unbeknownst to her at how deep it was. And then right after she was done, I asked her if I could record it again and share it with you. So this is a recording that I took of her last night with regards to her advice for what people can do if they're afraid of math. And she basically cites a pure and common sense argument, and that her point is that it's not like all these other scary things. All right, so we'll leave you with this, and then we'll start with questions. Thank you so much. What advice would you give to people that maybe are afraid of math?
It's okay. Don't be afraid. You can feel 2 feelings. That's fine. If you're nervous and you also want to do it, but there's no hitting, there's no slapping, there's no pushing, there's no grabbing, there's no of that, there's no haunted houses, there's no needles, there's no poking, there's no roughness. Just take it easy because there's none of that. Okay, bossy pants. So now you poodles, bye-bye.
I think when she gets excited, she searches her brain for certain words, and words like bossy pants came out and poodles. That's another conversation. So thank you for your time with that. All right, I'm gonna exit the full screen here and take it back. So Kaylin, if you want to take over here and tell us where we should go. Thank you
Well,
so much.
first of all, I gotta say, she's just adorable. So for all of our attendees, please feel free to enter any questions you may have in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. And so the first question is, when you were younger, be it a child or, you know, a teenager, young adult, like, did you yourself ever experience math anxiety, and how did that set you on this road to conquering it?
That's a good question. Yeah, I didn't. But I wasn't really proficient until relatively later, like eighth and ninth grade. In fact, it was eighth grade that I personally moved into the honors level. Prior to that, I was sort of middle of the road type of student. But what it was I think it never occurred to me because of the setup that I had, starting with my dad. My dad is a now retired, he's a world-class engineer, and he loved the stuff. And so I remember him sitting with me night after night after night with the little like desk lamp and the darkness all around. And we would do problem after problem after problem. And he had this look on his face like this, like he was lost in thought. And then in eighth grade, I had the great experience of a teacher who believed enough in me to promote me to honors when I wasn't in that class at the beginning. And this is basically, I tracked it back. This was the turning point. He stayed after school every day and caught me up little by little by little, never losing his cool, always being super patient, always being super welcoming, just to catch me up to the flow of the class. And my dad, yet again, knocked off work early, drove a long, long way back to where I was in school just to sit on the other side of the teacher and watch, basically watch. And he sat there quietly and watched as I struggled through that early stuff. It never occurred to me. And I think that I'm not saying that as a form of a brag or anything like that. That's all in gratitude to the setup that I had from my eighth grade teacher, Mr. Deleganis, and my dad setting me up in that regard. But I've seen it a lot as a teacher. I've seen a lot as a teacher, so I could comment on that.
So this is actually quite profound. What do you do to help a child who deeply believes they are bad at math, a belief that was set in motion by dysfunctional and anxiety-producing first grade approach to math? She's now in fifth grade, and they're uncertain how to undo this.
Right. That's a really, really important concept, right? To unlearn these feelings of helplessness is exactly where to start. So to the writer of this question, you hit the nail on the head. I would rewind the clock back to the moment within her abilities in which she actually feels comfortable. A great example is the 5 + 5, or even you could do something more advanced like 5 × 4 or something like that. But get it back to a simple question and ask, let's say you're doing the 5 + 5 and she says 10, and you ask, how does that make you feel? Do you hate 5 + 5? Do you think you're not qualified to do 5 + 5? Or is it just sort of neutral? The numbers themselves are neutral. This is the lesson to quietly pass along to her, that the numbers themselves are a neutral topic. They're staring at us blankly from the page. And it's our relationship with them that needs to change. So we have nothing really to be upset about once we make that realization. And then we can impress upon her that, can we move forward to a place where you don't feel comfortable anymore? And then just start there. And to destigmatize the feeling that she's learning something that she shouldn't be learning, that's below her grade level. If anyone understands the subjectivity of grade level, it would be homeschool families. So I'm just so grateful to have this moment with you. Grade level is a construct. It's entirely subjective. what we should talk about is the core concepts of the math, and that learning those things at the moment that she feels uncomfortable and getting to those initial feelings of success and confidence will give her the brain fuel, will give her the sort of a mental story that she can backtrack to. And the second that this person feels like a high five moment, let's say you have a high five moment as the teacher, as the educator parent, and you go boom and you do a high five, you totally got it. You got it. Remember, you didn't understand this 15 minutes ago. Now you see that, you understand this, and you didn't understand it 15 minutes ago. And they say, yeah, or they're quiet, depending on their personality, whatever. And then you make a request. Say, let's say her name is Sarah. Sarah, I want you to remember this feeling, this awesome feeling of understanding something that you didn't understand a little while ago. And always remember that this feeling is possible if you just give it a chance. Okay, just give it a chance. You're not the type of person to give up. That's not who you are. That's not who we are. See, I'm doing implicit family messages in the background, right? We're always learning. We're always growing. That's not who we are. Just give it a chance. And then you can get this feeling again. And those narratives will change the dial. And like anything that's real, it takes time and it's arduous and it's step by step.
What advice would you have for a home educator who's trying to dismantle their own math anxiety while trying to teach math to, a young person?
Oh, great question. What a great question. Yeah, okay. So, and this, I would assume that this parent is involved in the learning with their child. That's probably the case, most likely the case. I would say, depending on the ability of the kid, I would demonstrate the courage to talk about it, depending on age appropriate ways, and comfort. I would default to the family comfort and the family dynamic in that regard. But having said all those disclaimers, I would demonstrate the courage to not know, because you're modeling the feelings of not knowing and battling through it. And in fact, the more I really let in how this is the way, it's the only way, because how do you expect a student to work through discomfort if a parent, if an adult who's responsible for, like has adult level responsibilities and so-called adult level maturity, if we can't confront feelings of upset or fear, how can the student ever confront it if once they inevitably experience it? So I would model it in ways, and I would talk it through and be ready to laugh at yourself at times, and be ready to share a story. I have this saying that everyone has a math story. Everyone has a math story. You could ask anyone, what's your math story? And they're going to give you one. So I would share your math story, and it'll forge a closer connection with your child as well. And that's a beautiful thing too. So it's sort of a multiple benefit process.
That is. We have a question from Gretchen, but before I get to her question, I'm going to go mad with power because, I have the microphone, and ask, where do you think the concept of a math person versus not a math person came from? And why is that so accepted?
Yeah, I think that's entirely cultural. That's a cultural construct, and it's human beings' relentless obsession with describing something so that our egos can make sense of the world. No, it happens early on. This is what Piaget's study was in early childhood development.
Oh, I love him.
Yeah, he's great. And it carries over. It's the same process. A kid sees a bird and says, what's that? And the parent says, that's a bird. He says, bird, right? And then again, bird. And then a week later, at dusk, there's a bat that flies. And the kid goes, bird. And the parent goes, no, that's a bat. And so then the kid goes, oh, sometimes bird, sometimes bat. That's what learning is, isn't it? Everything is a category except when it's this other thing. And then it's this category if it's not this other thing. And then we create hierarchical structures in our brain. And that's how we categorize the world. And then connect the dots, a few years pass, we become adults, and it's like, math person, not a math person. That's the world. These are entirely humanistic, subjective, simplistic ways of looking at things. I mean, because you could just look at the term late bloomer. Late bloomer. There's room in our culture for late bloomer with regards to their careers or their relationships or friendships or school. So I think it's just our obsession with describing things, and I think it's on the wrong side of history, I believe, personally.
Well, sadly, that makes total sense. But anyway, now to get to Gretchen's question is, she has a daughter who understands math well, but has struggled with algebra. She's putting huge pressure on herself to achieve perfection and overthinks so many of the concepts. What would you recommend for this?
Okay. Yeah, so algebra is definitely the next level. Well, yeah, so algebra is the original definition, the root definition of algebra is to restore and to rebalance. That's what algebra means. It's an Arabic word. So basically you have the equal sign and you have, think of a balance scale. And if you remove 5 pounds here and remove 5 pounds here, it's still balanced, right? That's the concept of achieving balance. So if she's got good numerical processing capability and has had a good history with math, first I would encourage her to not lose hope and that she's too good to self-pressure. It's okay to feel ambitious. It's okay to feel like you want to improve. It's even okay to feel frustration. I think that's a good point that we don't really talk about too much. I have the image of Kobe Bryant, for example, missing a free throw. I talk about this with students I'm working with. When Kobe Bryant misses a free throw, the look on his face is of utter frustration. He's totally frustrated, but yet we celebrate that. That's great. Yeah, be frustrated. You should be. That's great. That's why you're doing this. So why should you not feel frustrated when you're doing something that's difficult or challenging, especially when you're starting out? So if frustration can be leveraged into rocket fuel, then it's really powerful, like to leverage that frustration. Beyond that, I have heard, and I'm not in any way affiliated or they don't even know about me, but I had a neighbor that showed me about this app called Dragon Box. It's for kids, it's for little kids, but there's multiple levels of this app called Dragon Box. And it's actually, it purports to teach algebra skills to kids without them even realizing it. Because what it is like you're moving things from one side to the other. And then there's a little like structural visual games that you move things around, and then that solves the puzzle. And that's basically, it's the early onset algebra. I'm not suggesting that you get it. I'm neutral either way. But it might be a good $5 investment in that regard. I haven't actually used it myself. I just watched it. But yeah, there's lots of hope. And once that hurdle is passed on the human level, then I think her abilities will blossom.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today. It's been absolutely wonderful. And I want to let everybody know that if you would like to add Yay Math to your homeschool, you can get it for 20% off at the co-op. And so that's as low as $57 for an entire year of these really, honestly, awesome math videos that Robert's put together. And if you get it in the next couple of days, we also have bonus smart points on it, but be sure to act on that because that will end very soon. So just visit the co-op. And again, Robert, thank you so much. And I would also like to thank all of our attendees for sharing your time with us today. It's always a pleasure to be part of your afternoon.
Thank you, Kaylin, for having me. And thank you for everyone in attendance. I know you have many things to do and lots of responsibilities, and the fact that you chose to share it with us today, that means a lot. And I wanted to honor your time with that regard and just give you everything that I could to possibly help you and inspire you and your family to success. So I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.